as the chair of the planning committee, but as we've combined the agenda, I'll go ahead and lead us through the agenda, if that's okay with you, Commissioner Schulman.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And before I call the meeting to order, I feel it's important to review our COVID protocol mask here at PSTA. And I received this from Mr. Miller today via our legal department. Give me a second to pull it up. And I'll share that with you. Okay. Due to the Florida governor, masks can't be mandated inside the public, to the public boardroom. But we can ask folks to please participate and wear masks. Now, those that are on this dais, or if you're speaking, it's okay to remove your mask because it becomes very muffled, not only to us in here, but to those that may be listening on Zoom as well. And then we'll put, I'll put my mask back on. So at PSTA, we are mandating masks inside all other areas of our building, including the lobby and restroom, etc. And that's perfectly allowable by our legal department. Thank you. So let's go around the room and introduce the other PSDA committee members with me in the room.
Josh Schulman, City of St. Petersburg on Finance and Planning Committee.
Councilmember Dan Saraki on the Finance Committee board.
Councilmember David Albritton, Planning Committee.
Commissioner Jeff Gow, CD Dunedin on the Finance Committee.
Michael Fredovich on Josh's committee, whatever it is.
Planning.
Planning.
I'm Richard Bennett. I represent the beach communities, and I'm on the Finance Committee.
County Commissioner Renee Flowers, I'm serving on the Planning Committee.
Councilmember Deborah Fix Sanders, City of St. Petersburg. I'm serving on the Planning Committee.
Thank you all. We know where you're from. And I don't believe we have anyone on Zoom. I think we're all here, as a matter of fact. So let's go to the public comment. And now is the time for public comment, either in person or by coming here to the PSDA lobby, or telephone by calling the number on the screen, which is 1-415-655-0002. Meeting ID is 180-358-3507. Clarissa, are there any members of the public here in the lobby?
There's nobody in the lobby.
Lobby, and there is nobody on the line for public comment.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Next, let's go for, I thank you, and next we go for action items. Since we're combining the Finance and Planning Committees, we need separate motions to approve the August minutes.
I'll move that the August 11th Finance Committee meeting minutes be approved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. And opposed? None. Do I have a motion from a Finance Committee member to approve?
Planning.
So moved.
Oh, I just said that, didn't I?
Second.
Wait, Planning Committee.
Who's running the show here?
It's late in the day. And anyway, we have a motion, a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? No. Okay, and our first item is to recommend the annual approval of several software license agreements PSDA uses. Julie, Director of IT, and Al, Motivated Director of Procurement, will talk about this item. Julie, go ahead. Or Al, go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioner
Good morning.
afternoon.
There you go.
I was kind of caught off guard. I saw so many people in the afternoon. I apologize, sir. Good afternoon. Al Burns, your highly motivated procurement director. This afternoon, Julie, my peer Julie Cagliostro and I are going to be bringing before you about 5 different IT contracts. And when we we go out and we procure all the goods and services for the agency, including all the IT contracts that we're about to bring before you. But when we were going through this process, I was like, Julie, what does all this stuff do? And help me understand exactly what me and my team are going to go out there and purchase or extend. And she educated me on that process. And I asked Brad and Debbie, I said, hey, is it okay if we present a PowerPoint to help educate myself and help you have a better understanding of what we're bringing to you this afternoon for action? So with that, Julie's going to give you an overview of everything that we're bringing before you. And at the conclusion, I'll talk to you about the procurement considerations. Julie?
Thank you, Al. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julie Cagliostro, IT Director. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Like Al said, I'm here to bring before you today an action item to approve a number of IT contracts. We kind of want to bring them to you in groups, just really for efficiency's sake. All of these contracts listed up on the board are all vital contracts. They're mission critical. We don't really have a choice. Changing the vendors would require a significant investment and really little or no benefit. So what we do is we take into account our sustainability goals, and we try to lower our recurring fixed costs, be resilient, keep resiliency in mind, and improve the customer experience. Next slide, please. So our first contract is Avail's FleetNet. There are PSTA's Enterprise Resource Planning application, and they're comprised of 28 modules that serves all of those departments, and it's basically a locally hosted application, and it's used by a number of transit agencies nationally. Next slide, please. So after quite a bit of collaboration, Avail developed a plan to actually move this from its antiquated version you can see in the background to an enterprise transit management solution and a cloud-based program. Next slide, please. So what is that really going to do? What is this contract going to cover? It's going to cover all the cloud costs and the data migration and the testing of the new application once we get it in place. And it's really going to help Avail to get all of its FleetNet clients onto the same version of the software. And then finally, the application upgrade. And we'll have a completely new application that will serve us much better. What it will get for us, next slide, please, are all the benefits of the cloud, and I could list them, but really what's really important to us at PSTA is that it's going to give us access to Power Business Intelligence, which has been a very important thing for us. Next slide, please, because we actually were invited by Avail to collaborate with them early on in the project, and our department heads actually, directors actually met with Avail and provided input on KPIs or key performance indicators that were important to us. And they developed dashboards that will replace, if you look in the background, our enterprise reports right now will be replaced by these modernized dashboards. We'll have them for finance. This one right here shows total revenue, expenses. I don't really know how much you can see, but you can see there's a picture and it's friendly. Next slide. We'll have a KPI dashboard for procurement to show requisitions, cycle times, active contracts, and thank you, Al Burns, highly motivated. We'll probably have DBE participation as well. Next slide, please. We have maintenance dashboards that will tell you vehicle asset management statistics. And next slide, please. And then you're going to have some heat maps that really pictorialize some of the things that are relative to us for the fleet, like cost per mile, and for the business, vendor spending by vendor, actually. Next slide, please. Then we're on to Clever Devices. Clever Devices is a very familiar name. They provide our computer-aided dispatch and our automatic vehicle location services, or CAD-AVL. They're, you think of them as one application, but they're really a host of applications, and they're integrated with quite a few things here at PSTA. And just to make it more friendly and so that people could see that they interface with the real-time bus information, they provide the, I'm going to call them heat maps for radio dispatch to manage the fleet on a daily basis. They also provide they provide locations to onboard systems and even out to the public. Next slide, please. And what they're doing now, their newest innovation is Clever Vision. And that's the development of a content management system that will help us get information to passengers in a much better way. We're going to transition to onboard monitors, both on the fleet and at the wayside. Next slide, please. So now, onto the communications part of this. I'm going to call it contract renewal, and this is our radio system usage fees. This is a very important county partnership. It's comprised of the law enforcement, E911, ambulance, school board, and PSTA. And this is a certified state intergovernmental public radio system. And we pay 4.3% share of the usage fees, which gets us access to about 14 sites, multiple channels, and it covers the 608 square miles of Pinellas County. So if you notice, there is a map here, and it is out of date because our usage fees also cover significant changes to the system. And they've recently changed a lot of things, including that we no longer communicate by telephone line, but by fiber. Next slide, please. So if we tried to maintain a system like this on our own, we could never achieve these highly important emergency management benefits and communication costs. Next slide, please. So finally, our wireless communication piece. That's T-Mobile and Sprint. And basically, they just provide, T-Mobile provides half of the passenger Wi-Fi and a good portion of the staff's cell phones. And Sprint provides Flamingo VR communication and the CAT-AVL connectivity plans. So that's my portion of the presentation. Now I'll turn it over to Al for procurement.
Thank you, Julie. I've been waiting to say this. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just want to slow down a little bit, and when Brad said, hey, Al, just go through this, put this matrix in here and go through it and to kind of explain exactly what we're doing. For Avail Technologies, the contract expires, the contract will expire, if approved, the contract will expire in December 31st of 2024, and the contract value will go to increase to $380,000. The increase to $380,000 is, it would be increased by $184,000 to a not-to-exceed amount of $380,000. And what we're adding to that, to bring it to that $380,000, is that cloud, primarily that cloud-based solution and those KPIs that Julie talked about. In regard to Clever Devices has been with PSTA, and it's a legacy, and along with Avail, they're both sole source procurements, which means that they cannot be procured from any other source, and we did not have to go out and do a formal competition. In regard to Clever Devices, this is for an annual software maintenance agreement, so it would expire in December 20th of 2022, and that would that value of that extension or for that maintenance agreement is $285,000, and it is a sole source. It's for all the critical infrastructure that Julie talked about earlier in her portion of the presentation. Motorola, T-Mobile, and Sprint. We utilize in public procurement, we're authorized to buy off of procurement schedules. Pinellas County went out and did a procurement, and we're named in that procurement, and we're reaping the benefits of that. And this contract would expire in December 16th, 2027, and it was procured by Pinellas County. The T-Mobile Communications contract, we utilize the General Services Administration, which is also known by GSA. And we're allowed to procure off of their procurement schedule, and we're procuring this until May 22nd of 2022 in the amount of $150,000. Now, in the background, GSA is going to be putting this out for public procurement and going out through the whole procurement process at a more elevated level than what we do here at PSTA. So in 2022, we'll be bringing this back to you for T-Mobile. The Sprint Solutions, that contract will expire in September 7th in 2023. And the contract, and we're bringing that from $82,000 to $202,000, which will last us for the duration of the contract. And we'll be bringing that back to you once the GSA contract expires. I wanted to go through that so you understand, have a clear understanding of what the procurement process looks like. And the goal of the procurement process is to lock in the rates that are typically escalated every year and lock those in for a longer duration, particularly under the, I want to call the what are these called? Those communication plans. As we do with all procurements, we checked all the vendors, did a responsibility check, checked EPLS, SAMs, and made sure that they're compliant. And Mr. Chair, once again, the action item that we're bringing before you, or this omnibus action item, is recommend approval of modification of contract years 2 through 5 with Avail Technologies Incorporated in the amount of $184,000 for an amount not to exceed $380,000. One contract with Clever Devices Limited for an amount not to exceed $285,000. 6-year contract with Motorola Solutions for an amount not to exceed $750,000. Increase T-Mobile total contract value from $99,000 to an amount not to exceed $150,000. And increase Sprint total contract value from $82,000 to an amount not to exceed $202,000. I know this is a lot of information, and Julie and I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Next slide, please.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Al. And do we have any questions from the Finance Committee members? Michael on Finance?
I have a question. Only question is, why do we use both Sprint and T-Mobile? I realize it's T-Mobile now owns Sprint, but why do we use them both? I mean, I do know that in the past, T-Mobile's price is usually a little bit lower anyway, so I'm just curious why we're using both Sprint and T-Mobile.
These are the communication providers.
I'm sorry?
The communication providers usually have like a specialty, a plan that they're really good at. And Sprint provides the individual transactional plans for the CAD AVL and the validators. And T-Mobile provides the full robust plans more economically. So we use them for the passenger Wi-Fi and the staff cell phones.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Schulman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a question about the Clever platform. What were we paying for those services under our prior contract?
The prior contract, we paid, I think, well, the total contract last was about $302,000, and 50-something thousand of that, I believe, let me be exact, 53,000 of it was engineering fees, on-site engineering fees. But Henry has improved so much that you do on your own here at PSTA, and also the planning department has done so as well, that we have eliminated and not had to make use of that. So the base contract last year was actually $252,000, and the base contract this year is $269,000. So it's about a 7% increase, but we have also added some items, text-to-speech on the cutaway vehicles, and there have been additional vehicles that were added to the fleet. So it's not truly 7% annually, it's about, I think it was 4 and 3, but I don't remember the exact numbers.
Okay, so while the base contract price is 7% higher than the prior contract, when you spread it out over the increased number of devices that we're using, it's a 3 to 4% increase from the prior
Yes,
contract.
which is very reasonable.
It is, and, honestly, my main concern whenever I see sole source, they've been our vendor since 2010, is, at some point, you wonder, are sole source contracts starting to take advantage of the fact that they're the sole source?
Yeah.
And are there other opportunities to change to a completely different platform, which I don't even know if this is the only company that provides this sort of thing in the industry, or not, but that was the genesis of my questions. I think I had a question about the Avail as well, but it is escaping me at this moment, so it must not have been that important.
Mr. Chair? I mean, one question which I think you're maybe getting at, and I thought we had on a previous version of this table, which maybe we can do for the board meeting, is just show the current contract value and just to see how much the relative increase is. Because as you look at this table, Clever Device looks like one of the most expensive at $285, but as Julie just said, it really is a pretty modest, increase. The biggest increase, at least that I understood, from this year to next year is in the Avail, and that's because they're going to this whole cloud. I mean, the price is essentially going up close to double what we had been paying for Avail, because they're going to the cloud. However, the competitors, the alternative to this system, this is still far cheaper than any other thing we could get, even at 380,000. So I mean, the Avail one is probably the biggest increase, but still a very good deal. And then again, that's 380 over
3 years.
5
yeah, 3 years. 3 years. So it's
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is the Avail contract, is there a base amount with that and then a conversion to the cloud amount, or is that going to be about the same baseline, about 160,000 per year?
It's actually going to be about a little bit over 100,000 a year.
Okay.
What you're seeing here, the increase, because this is a 5-year contract, and about 40% of what we pay annually is to maintain the software, to provide updates and be responsive to us for the changes that we'd like. And then the other percentage is for the cloud. It is for, at-rest data encryption and things that, we're not just paying a user fee for the cloud. We are actually paying for the benefits of the security and all of the cloud benefits that we'll have as a result of the program. So it's split into two pieces. It's about 50 for the cloud side, and I'd say 40 and under for the actual maintenance of the software portion.
Okay, and that's an ongoing cost.
That's an ongoing cost, yes, it is.
Yeah, because, so again, and we've talked about this when we talk about any of the software packages that we're buying or new technologies. What are the service agreements going to look like, and do we wind up then being captured by those vendors, for a longer term? So I appreciate you adding some additional information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a question, which, something that caught my eye. It's on page 12 of our packet. Clever Vision as an amenity. Can we put that up on the screen, please? Boo, but you're
Sure,
here.
can we open the slides and show the Clever Vision screen of the presentation?
Boo's right here.
I think Vu's not actually controlling it.
Oh, he isn't? I'm used to him
Page
controlling.
says Clever Devices.
Yeah,
There it
Clever
was.
Devices, page 12 of our packet.
Next slide. Next. 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 Next.
There.
Next.
No.
No, that one,
Oh,
There
you
go,
wanted
right
that
there.
one?
Right,
or-
right there. So that's,
that one.
that's not it. No.
He
No.
did. Next slide, please.
Clever Vision, but there we go.
Okay.
And which seems to be a pretty nice amenity. I got a few questions about it. I see it does a lot of things, Next Stop, real-time arrival, so on and so forth, PSAs. And my one question is, I'm sure we're budgeted for this amenity. And second is, we now have the annoying scroll, and to me anyway. And will that replace that or augment it, or do we know?
Yeah, the end goal is to finally replace all of the scrolls on board the vehicle.
Okay, good.
And
And to have a nice stop announcement, will it still be Bob Lasher? It's just, it doesn't make any difference. But anyway, I thank you all right? And, all right, so, yes, sir. I'm gonna show you.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. Additional question on that. I actually wrote that down as well. While that feature's built into the new service, it will include, we will have a separate contract, though, for hardware costs at the time, next year, when we're
So,
looking at that.
so new vehicles that are acquired by Henry at the moment do have the new monitors on them. And then Al mentioned before that you'll probably see us again, and that's going to be the contract to retrofit the fleet with not only an upgrade such as CleverVision, but to upgrade the CAD AVL in itself, because they're about over 11 years old now.
Okay, now is that, so all of that will be wrapped into the procurement for when this contract ends? So we're going to be getting those items from Clever as well, or potentially other sources?
Right? Great question, Commissioner Schulman. Right now, maintenance and IT are collaborating and developing a scope of work. Matter of fact, I think it was last week or earlier this week, I sent Henry some previous scopes of work, and all that's being developed. Short answer is we're going to bring a big package. It's going to be a pretty robust package that'll have the CleverVision on there, more monitors, the retro, the Ivan. I think there's going from Ivan 3s to Ivan 5s. And some of that equipment will be sole sourced, but we're looking for opportunities, in particular on our DBE side, for installation and things of that nature, where we could bring value add and unbundle it where we can.
Okay, so we're not captured by Clever necessarily, and I have nothing against Clever in particular, but where we can source other items from different vendors where appropriate.
Yes, sir. And I just want to make sure, remember, I work for Debbie and Brad. Just because it's sole source, even if it's FTA funded, does not mean we do not have the ability to negotiate. So we don't just take the first price that they put in front of us and say, okay, thank you, have a nice day. We look at it, and I work with my peers in finance, Michael Hansen, and the subject matter experts, and we ask for better pricing if we need to.
And I appreciate that, and that's how you become highly motivated.
Yes, sir.
So thank you for that.
Okay, if we have no more questions or discussion, we'll go ahead and ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we go ahead and accept staff recommendations, off our bullets.
Mr. Miller, do I need a motion from a member of the Finance Committee for this, though? Is that correct? I don't? Anybody? All right, Commissioner Flowers. We have a motion, we have a second. Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. And nobody opposed. Thank you all, and thank you for a good presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is to recommend the annual approval of 2 Looper agreements for the Looper service in downtown St. Pete. Cassandra Borchers, Chief Development Officer, will you take us through these 2 related items, please?
Absolutely. Good evening, committee members. Thank you very much for being here today. I'm always excited to hear something when some new technology is coming, especially those Avail dashboards. You know, we love data in planning. The other thing we really love is the partnerships that we have with our partner cities and the communities in Pinellas County. And we're so grateful for the partnership that we have on the Looper with the city of St. Petersburg. We can think about the service that is in downtown St. Petersburg as something that's very important to their economic development, and also the visitation that they have in downtown St. Pete. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. We have had multiple agreements with the Looper Inc. as well as the partners that help fund the Looper. In our most recent agreement, we took a look at the route in downtown St. Petersburg and made some expansion of that service to include the Innovation District, which is a major employment center in St. Petersburg. As part of that effort to really engage more residents and employees in downtown, we also expanded the service, and we were supported by the Florida Department of Transportation for the expansion of that service to include more early morning service. And so now the Looper operates starting at 7 a.m. on weekdays and 8 a.m. on weekends. In that same agreement, we decided to make it fare-free. And I'll show you some of the ridership implications of that decision, as well as some of the ridership implications of just over the last couple of years with us having to shut down their service due to COVID in March of 2020. And then when we resumed the service in June, we made some changes again to the service based on the demand, and then we're carrying those changes that we made in June forward into our next agreement. And those include reducing the number of trolleys on that service from 3 to 2. If you recall, in our 2019 to 21 agreement, we had added the electric vehicle from PSTA as the third vehicle on that route. We did that as a test to make sure that the vehicle could make a full day on the road, and Henry and his team are absolutely amazing, and of course they make those things sing, and now they're all over the county as opposed to just in St. Petersburg, but we felt we could still maintain the service in downtown St. Petersburg with 2 trolleys, and that would give us about 15 to 20 minute frequency on the route. We would maintain that early morning service, but due to the demand and talking to the Looper operational folks, we felt like pulling back from a midnight end on weekends to 10 o'clock would be sufficient for the service moving forward. Next slide, please. So I do know this is the data that I get very excited about, but also that we are going to have better dashboards next time. So I'll just walk you through this right now. In the blue, you can see the level of ridership that we had in fiscal year 18. In the red is when we made the changes to the route and also went fare-free. And in some months, we more than doubled the ridership on the Looper service, which is a great success. Unfortunately, in 2020, we needed to pull back a little bit on the service, and you see a decline in the riderships, though we were on track to exceed the expectations of fiscal year 19. That didn't happen in 2020, but in 2021, which you can see in the purple as we start to come back, we are gaining some traction and still above that 2018 level of ridership. And so I think once we're through the thick of what we're going through right here as a community, as in a nation, then we'll see that ridership return as well. Next slide, please. So there is a very important part of this funding agreement, and that is that there are multiple funding partners. The St. Pete Downtown Partnership is a sister agency to the Looper. They're housed together, and so they work with the downtown businesses to promote downtown and help business thrive. They also are able to get stakeholder contributions and advertising on the Looper, and that comes back to us as part of their partnership, and you'll see that in the line for the St. Pete Downtown Partnership contribution. In the agreement, they would pay this directly to the Looper because it's a paper transfer for them. There's no reason for them to pay us, for us to pay the Looper. On the other hand, the city of St. Petersburg will pay us directly, and we will then pay the Looper for their services. We do have a residual amount of money left over in our service development grant that we received for the previous 3 years, and so we'll roll that into this agreement and give our partners that credit for it, even though we will be receiving it from the Florida Department of Transportation as quickly as we possibly can in fiscal year 22. So in addition to the base level of service in this funding agreement, we've also added in a split for plug service. And so because we're going from 3 vehicles to 2 vehicles. There are some times when things do get busy in downtown, especially around the pier when they have an event, and we really do need a 3rd vehicle on the system in order to maintain the frequency. So we, each of the partners, agreed to throw in another $25,000 that would be at the discretion of the looper on those busy days to add in a 3rd vehicle. And so this allows us to keep a low cost of service for most of the year, and then just on those occasions when they need it, they have that available to them. Again, both of our partners in funding, the St. Pete Downtown Partnership and the City of St. Petersburg, both agreed to kick in $25,000 per year, and then PSTA would match that, their own $25,000. So we would be billed at a rate of 2/3 from the looper for that additional service, based on what I mentioned before, the City Downtown Partnership making a paper transfer to the looper in that case. And so with the total cost of service, we are actually overall paying less this year for the total cost of service than we did in the previous agreement, still getting a high level of service, and then the contract for operating is just slightly below that, taking out the contribution that is guaranteed by the St. Pete Downtown Partnership. And I just hope that chart wasn't too confusing. I know it's small, but I'll take your questions next. And again, there are next slide please, 2 action items before you today. One is the funding agreement, so bringing you the money, and then the operating agreement, taking the money back. And with that, I will take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Cassandra. And do we have any questions from the committee? Commissioner Schulman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we have any data on, you showed the ridership data. Do we have data per stop? Does the looper gather that data? I know because it's a free fare, so I'm not sure if they're counting what stops people are getting on and off.
So we do have the automatic passenger counters on our system, but we will be putting them on the looper.
So we don't have that data
Don't have
yet,
that data
except for when it's one of our buses.
Right.
I know that he collected some of that data just by hand counts. I don't think he's done it anytime recently during the pandemic, though. But we have some data on the various levels of ridership at each stop.
So, thank you. So without data, my comments are intuitive, not data-driven, which is uncomfortable for me. I prefer data. But, so it seems to me that the Innovation District probably needs less service 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. But other areas of the city, especially on, Friday nights and on the weekend nights, or Friday and Saturday night, could deal with having later service that still moves people around the entertainment venue area of downtown St. Pete. So,
True.
When looking at this, have we looked at, a possible modified route schedule that would allow us to continue to serve that entertainment corridor past 10 o'clock on Fridays and Saturdays, or is that not feasible?
It certainly is feasible. Based on the conversations with the looper operating manager, he didn't see that they were getting late night riders. And that's why he recommended that we end at 10 p.m. It was the city did ask that same question about later night service, and he was very clear that there was a limited amount of late night service, a late night ridership that he felt like it was not needed.
And I don't presume you could speak for him, but do we know if that's based on the recent experience, in a COVID-esque world, or is that based on the entire experience of the looper?
It is based more on his current experience. I mean, certainly there is a provision for service changes. We can work with him after we feel like ridership is coming back on new route changes or other service changes. I mean, as long as we don't exceed the number of hours, we can move them around or change the funding contributions.
Yeah, I would like to make sure that we're communicating with the business owners in that area. especially ones that operate later at night, to make sure that they know that there's a service change, and to be mindful of letting us know if there's, if it's creating an issue with the flow of people in that area. The other question I have is the $25,000 plug service. I presume we came up with that number because we anticipate that being enough to cover the peak times that we're seeing?
Yes, and that was at the suggestion of the St. Pete Downtown Partnership, and how much they thought they would need and how much they thought they could contribute.
Okay, thank you for that. No more questions.
Thank you. Cut myself off. Commissioner Flowers?
Thank you. I had a question around that plug service. I just want to make sure I understand. Under B, action item B, I thought in your presentation you said that the cost would be shared between us and the city, 25,000 apiece. Was that correct?
Yes, so the cost of the plug service will be shared three ways. The payment to the downtown partnership will pay the looper directly for their third, and the city will give us their money to pay, and that's a silly requirement that we have to go through for some federal data report.
The money has to change hands.
Right, but the city will give us the money.
But my question is it 25,000 or is it 50, just because the language?
It's 75,000. It's 25,000 from the downtown partnership, 25,000 from the city, and 20,000 from PSDA.
Okay, but why does it say budget not to exceed 50,000?
Because the looper cannot bill us more than 50,000.
Okay.
And they should be billing us at 2/3 of the rate.
Okay.
So what we would like to see on their invoices is, we did this many hours at this rate, you get a 33% discount, now you pay us the other 66.
I just wanted to make sure, because I didn't want it to appear as though if we were only paying 25, that we were paying 50 on paper. So thank you.
Good.
Yes.
That's a good question. That's a good comment, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Have we any more discussion?
No, I was just gonna make a recommendation.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
I recommend that we approve the 3-year funding partnership agreement as well as the 3-year operating agreement with Looper Incorporated.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Thank you, Cassandra.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We move on to Jacob, who I guess is on Zoom. Yes, there's Jacob. Hello, Jacob.
Hello, how are you? Great to be here again.
Now, listen, this is an exciting presentation because it's from you, number one, senior planner. And he'll present the interlocal agreement with the city of Clearwater to bring the AVA autonomous vehicle pilot to Clearwater Beach. Jacob, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Chair. Just continuing the tradition of the last several action items of things that we love and excited about between the dashboard and the Looper service, and now obviously very excited to continue AVA's countywide tour, and next up, of course, being in Clearwater. So today I just want to talk to you a little bit about the interlocal agreement that we're working on with the city of Clearwater, and just a little bit about the demonstration itself. Next slide, please. So as you will likely recall, so back at our April 2021 board meeting, we were finalizing a procurement to continue the very successful AVA demonstration that occurred in St. Petersburg from last November through March. And of course, BEEP was selected at that board meeting to continue the demonstration in Dunedin and Clearwater. And in addition to that, prior to that board meeting, CBARTA and PSTA had approved a memorandum of understanding to provide some of their federal funding for the demonstration that split 50-50. So CBARTA provides 50% of the funding, and PSTA provides the remaining 50% from our capital reserves to fund these demonstrations. Next slide, please. Shown here is the proposed demonstration route that we've developed in coordination with the city. So the path here shows the route going up and down Gulfview Boulevard, starting just south of the roundabout adjacent to the Pier 60 lot, going down Gulf View, and then kind of turning around and going back up north just before it gets to the bridge that goes over to Santee. And all of the bus stops shown here on the screen are existing PSDA bus stops, as we have done with other AVA demonstrations. Next slide, please. So here's just a summary of the terms of the interlocal agreement. We are still working on finalizing the exact language of the agreement, but the responsibilities to ensure the success of the project will remain the same nevertheless, and are consistent with the interlocal agreements that we have approved for both Dunedin and the St. Petersburg demonstration. So several of the primary city responsibilities in the agreement are improvements to the route infrastructure. So this is primarily patching any potholes, which typically isn't an issue, as well as trimming any trees or any other vegetation that might be protruding into the roadway that might affect some of the sensors on the shuttles. And in addition, there's supposed to be a space identified for secure rooftop in order to install satellite communications equipment required for the demonstration. In addition, there's also provision about any necessary improvements to stop infrastructure, primarily making sure that it is ADA compliant, so mobility devices can be accommodated. Again, this shouldn't be an issue since we plan on utilizing existing ADA accessible PSTA bus stops. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly to ensuring the success of the project, is identifying a vehicle storage location, which we're currently in the midst of working with the city on. So this has to be, as with our previous storage facilities, it has to be a secure facility with access to electricity for charging and ideally water for the cleaning of the vehicles. In addition, PSDA has several responsibilities to, of course, fund, deploy, and maintain the demonstration project. We're also responsible for developing and installing any signage that might go at the stop locations to let riders know that it is a designated AVA stop. These are typically just A-frames, temporary A-frames that we put up at stop locations that just let riders know that it's an AVA stop and that it's with the AVA branding. And we're also responsible for providing emergency response training for fire, rescue, and police departments on the AV shuttle. And in addition, we also provide training to, safety training to the BEEP co-pilots as well. Next slide, please. So the action item today is to recommend the approval of an interlocal agreement with the City of Clearwater in a final form that's accessible to the CEO for the deployment of the AVA demonstration in Clearwater Beach. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jacob. Do we have any? We have questions. All right, Commissioner Saraki, go ahead.
Mr. Chair. Jacob, I have one question on slide 2 of the map.
Yes.
Are those circles, does that mean those are bus stops?
Yes.
Yeah, so those are existing PSTA bus stops along the route that we identified with BEEP and the City of Clearwater as places where the shuttle can stop. Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. So those are the only stops for this?
Well, as of right now, although we are going to look and see if there are any opportunities to put another stop south of the one shown at Gulfview Boulevard and Bayway Boulevard. I know there's some construction happening on the south side of the route. I think there's a hotel going up, so we're going to look and see if we can put an additional stop a little further south.
Thank you very much. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions from the board here? Okay.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Saraki and a second from Commissioner Albritton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes. Next, we have Heather. Thank you, Jacob, for your work on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And next item is a resolution PSDA needs to be eligible to apply for potential federal solar energy grants. Heather Sobush, Director of Planning, will talk about this. Heather? Hello.
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry, my daughter popped in just at the wrong time. As you mentioned, this is a resolution to approve what's called the local mitigation strategy, and I'll explain a little bit about what that is. So you may have remembered that we previously presented you information about a proposed PSTA solar project. We've since since been pursuing various sources of funding for the project, one of which is FEMA's Building Resiliency in Communities, or BRIC grant program. The BRIC program was developed in recognition of the growing hazards associated with climate change and the need for natural hazard risk mitigation activities. So around this time last year, we began researching how we would go about applying for this grant, as it's a different, it's through FEMA, and we're more accustomed to applying through FTA. And so we discovered that the BRIC program would require that our project be approved by a group called the Local Mitigation Strategy Working Group, made up of staff from local jurisdictions in Pinellas County. And it would have to be approved on their hazard mitigation list, and then also that our board would adopt the local mitigation strategy. So the countywide LMS or local mitigation strategy, is a broad plan that defines various types of potential hazards to the community, ways to minimize the impact of these hazards, and the roles and responsibilities of the county and participating municipalities. PSTA's solar project was approved as an eligible project on that hazard mitigation list earlier this year. And now we just need the board to adopt the LMS, which is what the resolution is, and why I'm bringing this to you. So once approved, we'll be able to apply for the grant during the application period, which opens on September 30th. And that's all I have today, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Who's the dog?
That's my dog.
Okay, well, that's fine. Do we have any,
I see that every one of your representative cities are already in the,
I see that, too.
in the Pinellas County plan, and PSTA will be joining you, hopefully.
Any question from the committee here, please? Comments, question? No comments or question? Do I have a motion to recommend approval of this solar energy resolution? Okay, we have Commissioner Schulman and Commissioner Fredovich. We consider that a second, all right? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All righty. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Put the dogs to bed. Our final action item today is to recommend approval of a bus stop easement agreement in the city of Largo. Abhishek Dayal, PSTA's Director of Project Management, will take us through this item. Abhishek?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Finance Committee. I am Abhishek Dayal, Director of Project Management, even though the slide here says Michael Hetrick, Assistant Project Manager, but I'm filling in for him. The item for action today is to approve an easement agreement with a developer, GHB1 Property Management, which would allow us to have access to their site, where they essentially will be placing a shelter pad for us as part of a development agreement with the city of Largo. Next slide, please. So this map shows the location in the county. It's right in the city of Largo. And if you go to the next slide, please. This is just a closer view of where this shelter pad will go. Incidentally, this stop is also a high ridership stop, which warrants a shelter. So it's a great location and a great opportunity for us to be able to get a shelter pad at no cost to PSTA. And we would also get access to the site, which the developer would be using for the shelter pad. So again, the action item today is to approve an easement agreement with this developer at no cost to PSTA. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Move approval. Well, that's wonderful. Do we have any questions from the committee? I have one question, Abhishek, if there's none here. And this is located right near like a series of shopping centers, am I not correct? And there's a McDonald's, I think, on the corner, if I remember the area correctly. And is there going to be like a housing?
That's exactly right.
And it'll be a housing development that this developer's doing, or the renovation of that mall, or do you know?
I'm not quite sure, Mr. Chair. I know there's a strip mall, and that's what really gets us the high ridership at this location. But I'm not quite sure what type of development is supposed to go in on that site, but be happy to get that information.
Okay, well, no, it's really not that important, but I'm just kind of excited for the city of Largo. They're moving up a little bit too. But all that being said, do we have a motion to approve?
I made the motion.
Oh,
I'll support.
okay. We have Commissioner Flowers who made the motion to approve and Commissioner Bennett to second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Okay, now we're on item 4. It's a bus replacement plan with Henry and Debbie. And it's an important information item to lay out a plan for upcoming bus replacements. And I understand we will take action on purchasing the buses in the next 2 months. Henry Lukasik, Director of Maintenance, and Debbie Leas, Chief Financial Officer, will give this presentation. Henry, go ahead.
Well, good afternoon. So those commissioners that are used to seeing me at the Finance Committee level, in the spirit of prime time, I have put on a blue shirt. So as veterans of the board know, typically each year we come to talk about buses or some sort of vehicle replacement. And usually that is done each year to expect those buses to be received the next year, the following year. Well, today's info item is a little different, and it's really because in terms of our fleet and how many vehicles we had and when they were purchased, way back when, we've come to somewhat of an interesting milestone here where we're going to need to look at least 5 years ahead and come up with a 5-year replacement plan. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But in order to understand that, we have to understand how did we get here from there. Next slide, Bob. So I'm not a Florida resident. Well, I am now, but I wasn't when Representative Bill Young was in the House. And way back when he was also Representative Florida, but just so happened to be the House Chairman, Committee on Appropriations. Well, Tampa Bay got quite a bit of funding coming to the area. PSTA was not exempt from that. In fact, Representative Young was quite the benevolent benefactor to PSTA back in that era. So much, in fact, that from 2005 to 2008, PSTA was able to purchase 106 buses in 4 years. But, as we have all seen with inflation today, a 40-foot transit bus in 2005 cost $250,000. We all know that that is not the case today, no matter what we choose to purchase. So for those that need a brief background, PSTA on average has approximately 210 what we call heavy transit buses. These are all the buses that we see out on the street. The 60 buses represents the 2005 and 2006 model year fleet. Bob, next slide, please. On your screen and in your packets, we don't have packets anymore. On your screens and on your screens, you can kind of see the 60 buses. These are the oldest buses that PSTA has currently in service actively today. We like to refer to them as the workhorse of the fleet because this is where most of them live. As you can see, we've got about 15 2005 model buses that right now are presently 16 years old, and we have 45 2006 buses that are 15 respectively. On the last column, the average miles, this is actual on the odometer of the buses. Now, FTA, Federal Transit Administration, still to this day defines the useful life of a transit bus as approximately 12 years and 500,000 miles, more or less an if-then. Yes, It's one of the missions of the PSTA Maintenance Department, which is to maximize the life of the bus as much as possible. So it is not unheard of that when we talk about buses, it is usually to replace buses that are on average 15 years old, mostly because we know that we have quite a bit to replace. Now, again, the question is, why 60 buses and why 5 years? So, as you can see, from 2005 to 2008, PSTA purchased a lot of buses. Specifically looking at the year 2006, 45 of those buses were delivered in 1 year. When we talk about a vehicle replacement strategy, 45 buses delivered in 1 year is not really something that we would recommend duplicating in the future. There's other avenues and other strategies. If we happen to come upon a grant or some sort of funding from the sky, that we could spread those out to a manageable replacement plan. In fact, going back into our replacement strategy over the years, starting in 2009, we averaged approximately 8 to 12 buses per year that we've purchased. And that is a manageable plan to keep up on. So why 60 over 5 years? This is the hump that we need to get over. The 60 buses represents, again, the oldest buses. I commend the Fleet Maintenance Division of the Maintenance Department. They have kept these things going. These buses are now going on a third repower, and what that means in layman's term is the bus comes in, it receives a remanufactured engine, transmission, powertrain, assembly, HVAC system. So we've done this 3 times over the life of the bus. So maintenance doesn't have too many tricks left up its sleeve anymore to keep them going. Next slide, please. So when we talk about a replacement strategy, and Debbie's going to follow up with the second piece of this presentation, which is about funding and where we stand with that. But again, we really need to purchase the 60 buses over the 5 years. I say this because by the time 5 years passes, the last batch of 12 buses, and it's 12 over 5 years, the last batch of 12 buses will actually be 20 years old. And they will actually have 1 million miles on them. But this is not unheard of, much like the trolleys from previous purchase. Those had 1.5 million miles on them. Now, part of our strategy is, of course, we want to replace as many of these vehicles with zero-emission buses, subject to available funds. Of course, any other buses should be low-emission hybrid electric. Throughout this entire time, even presently, as we are doing now, but also ongoing in the future, continue to develop and design and install the infrastructure to support an all-electric vehicle, zero-emission footprint. And it goes without saying is that if the government is going to offer competitive grants, we are going to apply for them. We will work tirelessly to apply for those grants, 24 hours, 8 days a week. And of course, we want to stay focused on where the attention is. And that's the goal of a 100% zero-emission fleet. And with that, I will turn it over to our CFO, Debbie Lees.
Thank you, Henry. Hi, Debbie.
Good evening, and thank you, Henry. Debbie Lees, Chief Financial Officer. And Henry's laid out the plan that we need the 60 buses, and I'm going to put a plan out there of how we're going to get there. Currently, we have, out of our Federal Transit Administration FTA formula funds, we anticipate having about $46.1 million that we can put towards these buses. Of that $46 million, I have about 60% percent of that already either under grant or coming under grant this coming year. The rest of it is what we anticipate that we will have available to put towards this. However, as Henry mentioned, a bus no longer costs $250,000. It's a lot more. We've got computers on wheels, we've got a lot of technology. To have zero-emission buses, we're going to need $75.5 million, including the chargers that will be needed for this. So we've got a delta here of over $29 million to be able to have 100% zero-emission buses. And I feel there's a really strong potential to get that funding, but we're not at the finish line yet. Next slide, Bob. So to get to this about, I'm rounding it up, $30 million over the next 5 years, we have a lot of opportunities. We've got the infrastructure bill, we've got a potential for increased appropriations, partnerships with Duke Energy. I don't know if you all know, but Duke's already been a great partner with us, providing the depot chargers that we have on our property today. The VW settlement funds, again, if we get a huge amount of those, don't know that that'll happen, we are not going to allow what has happened in the past to buy a whole lot of buses in one shot. We're just not going to do that for the next people who come behind us. Brad thinks I'm going to be here in another 20 years. I don't think so, but I want to leave a good legacy for those that are. And as we said,
You're going to give this PowerPoint in 2036, Debbie.
I'll bring it back out then, when I come up with my little walker. But we are going to have a lot of opportunities for a lot of grant funding. And one of the things we didn't talk about yet, another challenge, if you're buying a car today, you're going to find it challenging because there aren't these microchips that go in them. There's a lot of things that we don't have, and things are a little slower than normal. So if we order buses today, it may take up to 2 years to get those buses on property. Next slide. So today has been an information item, and we have laid out a strategy for replacement of the 60 buses, both from the replacement of how many each year and from a funding perspective. These are going to lead, this whole strategy is leading to action items. As you know, PSTA is leading the state in electric bus procurement that Henry and Al Burns have been working on, and we're going to be bringing that to the board. Now then, this is also good timing, not only with the electric bus procurement for the state, but probably with the infrastructure bill. And I am going to be very excited to be able to say I think we'll be the first transit authority in the state to make use of that procurement as we move forward. And, you know, this whole zero-emission bus plan is where we're headed to the future. So when you know what the end game is, you could work towards it. And I think what we have here is very realistic and achievable over the next 5 years. So with that, I'll take questions as well as Henry.
Commissioner Schulman? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so this is our plan to replace the 60 buses that were purchased 0506. I don't have the fleet age by year memorized. What are our 2007 buses, our 2008, our 9s, our 10s? So I imagine we're going, during that 5-year replacement plan, we're going to be overlapping the replacement need for those buses as well.
That would be correct.
It tapered off quite a bit.
I would imagine once you got 60 buses delivered all at once, there was not a need as much in 7, 8, and 9, but I don't know what that is.
I just so happen to have that information.
I knew you would, that's why I asked the question.
So, to reiterate, 20 in 2005, 46 in 2006, 20 in 2007, 20 in 2008, but that's actually a lower number because some of those were 2008 trolleys, and some of the 2008s have been replaced already by electric buses and through attrition. So I would actually say that's closer to 12. And then 2009, 12, 2010-13, we get into the era of the 8s, 2012, 2013, 2014, all 8. 2015 was 13, still manageable. 2016 was 7. 2017 was 3. 2018 was 9 heavy buses, it was not, yes, 9 heavy buses, 2 all-electrics, and 8 cutaways. It's a little higher number there, but it's spread out amongst 3 different types of vehicles. 2019 was 9. 2020 was 4 electrics.
Thank you. I hope there's not going to quiz later. I only wrote some of those down. So looking at 2007, 2008, 2009, we have 2012 and 12. In your original comments, you said 8 to 12 replacements per year was a sweet spot and an amount that we can handle. How are we going to replace those buses on top of the 12 that we're looking at replacing now? What's the plan for those?
The plan for that is to essentially continue running them as long as we can, for 15 years. So while new equipment is coming in, new equipment or old equipment's going out, and once we get through this hump, we're going to have some smooth sailing later on. But I can tell you that the maintenance department can get these 2007 buses predominantly to the finish line in order to make this plan successful.
Well, because 15 years for the 2007s is next year. So, you know, by the time we're done replacing those, they will have been out there for 20 years. If we replace that first schedule and then have to go back and start replacing the other ones. So I just wasn't sure if that's really the plan, is then to try to, you know, push the 7s, the 2007s, 8s, 9s out 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, as Henry is showing, we do have I think we made a 25-year fleet replacement plan to try to manage, as he said, kind of get over the humps that were in the past during the earmark days and kind of go more of a steady replacement schedule, which, if you kind of do the math, 12 is a pretty good number to get through all that. We could certainly present a 10-year plan, and how many buses we want to get during the 10 years, but my thought was, well, 5 years, there's certainly questions about the changing in technology and where we're going to be in 5 years. The 5 years is what they're kind of proposing for this authorization bill, this Senate bipartisan infrastructure bill that is really focusing on electric buses. So, I mean, the planning will still continue, I think. Just like you say, I mean, we still have to get 2007 every year. The thought was, well, could the board approve this 5-year plan so that then we know, hopefully in the next month or so, at least what our legislative committee is hearing, is that we'll know more what's happening in DC, whether they approve a infrastructure bill or not. And then that'll help us decide how many buses to buy this year, of if we have the funding for hopefully all electric, or whether we buy whatever, 10 electric, 2 hybrid, or whatever.
Okay.
That was my thought.
Okay, well, and that makes sense from a planning perspective. Was the number 12 buses, was that based on, you mentioned math, so I wasn't sure if it was based on finances or if it was based on the maintenance department's ability to, you know, put them in service? Where do we get that number?
The 12 is a manageable number for all things considered, at least, well, from the maintenance department and from a capital replacement plan, it is manageable to get those turned around in a service.
Okay, so it is both, it's not just financial, it is also the ability to actually put those into service.
Yes, there is a financial component to it, obviously, but from looking into the future, when perhaps me is standing here in the year 2040-something, I can say we need to purchase 12 buses, not 46 again. So this is the challenge. I agree with you, Commissioner. 60 buses, this is the hump. I have a nice graph.
Right.
We need to get over that huge mountain there, and then, you know, once that happens, we can have a more ideal replacement strategy for future versions of staff and the board to consider.
Okay, sure. One final question, probably. So this 5-year plan is really to help us get in front of other funding sources with a, well-thought-out, zero-emission plan, knowing that we're going to have to, within the next year or two, come up with a plan for the other, the fleet that's coming due for 7, 8, 9.
Yeah.
That's correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner Albritton?
Yes, I'm really glad that we're going to zero emissions. And when we started talking about this a year or two ago, my concern was the battery life, you know, how long that does. And it was surprising to find out it was 25 years, something like that. I guess my question is, if you're pushing 1 million miles for these diesel buses, do we have any idea what the life of a electric bus is going to be? Is it just going to be the 25, or are you going to be able to? I guess battery technology is happening so fast now. I mean, maybe in 5 years, you know, it'll be a whole different ballgame.
You're spot on. You're spot on in your assessment. Sitting here today, I can't tell you what 5 years in battery technology will be. It is changing rapidly, so rapidly, in fact, I can't tell you what it'll be 2 years from today. I'm known for saying that the battery you buy today is not going to be the battery of tomorrow, right? But at some point in time, you have to make a decision. So, to clarify, on the electric buses that we have right now in service, the battery is rated for 26 years. Now, getting back to that, we are required to keep these buses in service for FTA for 12 years or 500,000 miles. That's what we have to do. We have no question on that. Fortunately, for the manufacturer of battery electric buses, BYD, they have warranted those batteries for the full life of the bus, 12 years. I can tell you that when Mr. Burns sits down with the bus OEMs for our PSTA-led state schedule, warranty is going to be a high focal point of discussion. So, yes, batteries are changing rapidly. Advancements in battery technologies just reaps the rewards of greater range. And that's right now what somewhat the limitation of an electric bus is right now is the range, but it is growing and growing each year.
Okay, so just to follow up, you've got the diesel buses, and you pretty much got that figured out. The guys know how to replace the engines and everything. So I imagine you're taking into account the electric part of it and how that's going to fit into the maintenance schedule and so forth.
Yes, we continue to train our technicians. I'm happy to report that I have some of the best and brightest senior maintenance technical staff in North America, and I'm not overstating that, who are very specialized individuals in high voltage propulsion systems. We grow with the technology incrementally. We keep our technicians constantly trained on the latest and greatest, and of course, I do nothing but keep up on battery electric technology in my spare time and work time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a comment or question too for you, Henry. So essentially, we're doing the engine drivetrain and the HVAC about every 250 to 300,000 miles. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
Correct.
Okay, so seemingly we can get through the next 5 years. And, but then we're gonna start running into the hybrid, which, that's happened in 2009. Isn't that when we had hybrid, electric buses delivered?
Yes.
And is that any different in the engine, HVAC, and the drivetrain to replace those? Have we done any of those yet?
Yes, we have, in their normal life cycle, completed the same overhauls, as we call them. The only addition to that is we refresh the batteries as opposed to replacing them. We are capable of doing that.
Okay. That's all I got. Thank you. And there's no motion on this, but we appreciate all your information, Debbie and Henry. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and finally, each year, the Finance Committee reviews all of PSDA's financial policies. This year, there are no changes proposed from last year, but Debbie Leas is here to answer any questions about the policies which are summarized in your packet. Are there any questions for Debbie? It's a day without sun. Commissioner Schulman, go ahead.
And I promise I'm not asking questions just to get us to 6 o'clock. But, looking at the investment guidelines, really just had a question. We have a lot of different guidelines based on the different kinds of investments that we can invest in. And I don't have the chart that shows where we currently are invested. Can you share where funds, just in a general breakdown, like there's A, B, C, D, for different types of investments, what we're currently taking part in?
We're into certificates of deposit. Our investment looks like a solid whoopie pie instead of a pie with different slices in it. It's just like one solid thing. So we've got money markets, CDs. We have not ventured into anything overly exciting at this point. All those are fully collateralized and back so that they're, you know, we feel very risk averse.
And I appreciate that, and that was my recollection. My only question or thought was, in that as an institution, we are concerned about sustainability and community investment, that we consider potentially adding, economic sustainability governance guidelines to our investment mix to make sure that as we do move forward, if we choose to do anything or work with an institution, that those institutions' values are aligned with our values, and those currently aren't in there as a stated guideline.
That's excellent, and that's something, I've talked to Brad about, and Michael Hansen, who's sitting back here, our Director of Finance, and title's changing to Director of Financial Planning and Analysis, that we can maybe look, as we're getting some of the funds in from CARES, Carissa, ARP, that we take a little bit broader step, because as we, every little place that I can get some extra money to put towards our sustainability goals in all aspects, I think it's a good idea, and I love what you're saying, to make sure that they're aligned with us.
Yeah, and from my standpoint, if we're looking at a CD, if we give up a immaterial amount of interest revenue to instead invest or put our money with a bank that is a good community partner and is reinvesting back into our communities, that is a better overall value for the tax dollars that we have entrusted to us than just a little bit of extra interest. So those sorts of considerations in the policy statement, I think, are a good thing to look forward to. So thank you.
I really appreciate that, thank you.
Have we any other questions or discussion here? If not, Debbie, thank you so much. And number 5, similarly, the monthly financial and other reports are available in your packet, so feel free to ask Debbie or Brad any questions you may have. Now, after we adjourn this meeting and prior to the budget hearing starting at 6 p.m., the staff will play a Florida Department of Transportation prepared video about their updates of the state intermodal system, which are primary roads throughout Florida. FDOT asked us for us to play the video. Enjoy the film. And the meeting is adjourned.
Mr. Chair, if I can, just one.
Of course, Josh.
I got 40 minutes. Just 2 things. One, I wanted to say I was very excited. I was driving on 275 and saw the first bus on shoulder
Oh, excellent.
go by. That was great to see. followed by quickly being disheartened by the work truck and pickup truck that were following it behind on the shoulder. So our nice phone, yeah, they were
Like unauthorized?
unauthorized vehicles just saying, hey, that's faster. So it was fantastic, and then it wasn't. I also wanted to mention, I was watching the school board meeting last night, and there was a good bit of conversation from the school bus drivers. And I'd just like to point out that while every organization has their own challenges, it was a testament to how well things are run here, that our bus drivers are celebrating the work that we do and the work that they do here versus going in front of the board and complaining about working conditions, pay, benefits, and things like that. So we just had our contract re-up, and I wanted to just say it was more evident last night that we're doing a great job here for our community and our drivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
That's a good comment.
Where's the movie? Is there a movie?
Uh,
Oh, it's 6?
No. Prior to 6 o'clock, there,
How long is it?
it's like 15 minutes long.
Do you have popcorn or soda or anything? Please.
As I already told Commissioner Bennett, no.
Okay, well, let's turn it on.
Thanks for using WebEx. Visit our website. The caller has disconnected the line. Goodbye.
The proposed focus areas to get your input.
Sit in here.
The SIS is a statewide network of high-priority transportation facilities, including Florida's largest and most significant airports, spaceports, public seaports, freight rail terminals, passenger rail and intercity bus terminals, rail corridors, waterways, and highways. These facilities represent the primary means for moving people and freight between Florida's regions, as well as between Florida and other states and nations. Florida established the SAS in 2003 for many reasons, all of which are still relevant today. A primary reason was to help meet growing demand for moving people and freight as our population and economy continued to expand. The SAS was envisioned to support Florida's economic competitiveness by connecting our regions to markets within our nation and worldwide. Many industries require access to multiple modes of transportation, providing seamless flows of both people and goods. In addition, the SIS was intended to support the state's community planning goals by focusing transportation investments on existing transportation hubs and corridors, so we can maximize the use of the most current system. Finally, the SIS was intended to focus our essential state resources on those transportation facilities most critical to Florida's economy and quality of life. Florida statute requires the department to update the SIS policy plan at least once every 5 years, following the update to the Florida Transportation Plan, also known as the FTP. The SIS policy plan is developed by reviewing the most recent FTP goals and objectives to ensure the SIS policy plan is in line with the FTP. 2045 is the horizon year for the current FTP, and the SIS policy plan is an implementation action of the FTP. In addition, the process considers current trends and conditions, including applicable performance measures, to ensure the plan addresses key issues and opportunities for the SIS. The process requires collaboration and input gathered through various partner and public outreach efforts, such as partner briefings, social media outreach, virtual outreach, and surveys. The 35-member steering committee that guided the update of the FTP in 2020 is assisting with the update of the SIS policy plan this year. A public comment period will accompany the draft final plan in late 2021. Following the public comment period and final management approval, the final plan will be adopted. The SIS is made up of two basic components. One, SIS facilities, which meet high levels of people and goods movement, generally supporting major flows of interregional, interstate, and international trips. And two, strategic growth facilities, which are smaller in nature and generally are designated to support niche markets, underserved geographic areas, or other unique economic communities. The SIS includes 3 types of facilities. 1, hubs, such as airports, seaports, and other types of terminals. 2, corridors, such as highways, rail lines, and waterways. And 3, connectors, which link the hubs and corridors or hubs to other hubs and military access facilities to corridors. The policy document generally addresses and includes the following topics. It defines objectives for how we plan and manage the SIS, consistent with the broader goals for the FTP. It outlines focus areas for the SIS that are to be addressed over the next 5 years as part of the plan update. It sets forth policies or strategies directed towards these objectives and focus areas. And lastly, it sets forth implementation guidance on how to carry the plan forward. The current 2016 SIS policy plan objectives still correlate to the current FTP goals related to mobility, transportation options, and economic competitiveness. They also continue to represent the long-standing framework of the SIS and its original intent. The 2022 SIS policy plan will focus on these 5 areas. Safety. How does the SIS, as a key element of the state's transportation system, contribute to our vision of eliminating fatalities and serious injuries on Florida's transportation system? Resilience. How can we reduce vulnerabilities of SIS infrastructure to risks including extreme weather, sea level rise, coastal and inland flooding, wildfires, and extreme heat? Technology and innovation. How do we prepare the SIS for emerging technologies, such as automated, connected, electric, and shared vehicles? Urban mobility and connectivity. How do we address the impact of congestion in both major and developing urban areas on the efficiency and reliability of the SIS for interregional travel, especially in areas where there are limited options for adding capacity to SIS corridors or limited modal alternatives to SIS highways? Rural mobility and connectivity. How can the SIS support rural revitalization and economic development and facilitate emergency evacuation and response while supporting environmental stewardship goals and community visions? For each focus area, we will present some high-level ideas for improvements. Building on the FTP and SHSP, the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, we have identified several potential safety-related policies for inclusion in the SIS policy plan. Here are some of the ideas based on input received so far. Increase the emphasis on safety as a factor in setting priorities for SIS projects. Provide more flexibility to include safety features as part of SIS capacity projects. Address engineering and operational solutions related to emphasis areas associated with higher fatality rates on the SIS. An example could be to add guardrails, rumble strips, or clear zones to address lane departures. We have identified several potential resilience-related policies for inclusion in the SIS policy plan. Here are some of the ideas based on input received so far. Consider vulnerabilities in the community and environmental screening process as part of SIS designation. For example, if there are 2 options for a connector and one is in a storm surge zone, designate the alternative. Identify resilience strategies as part of capacity needs in projects. For example, use ITS or sensors to detect hazards and share information. Expand SIS funding eligibility for adaptation or retrofit of existing infrastructure. An example would be elevation change, base layer hardening, or stormwater management to help maintain the SIS facility's safety and capacity. We also might consider expanding the definition of capacity to include increasing redundancy or providing alternatives to mitigate vulnerabilities on the system. We have identified several potential technology-related policies for inclusion in the SIS policy plan. Here are some ideas based on input we received so far. Redefine SIS capacity projects to include technology solutions for improving efficiency and reliability. In other words, define SIS projects not just as increasing the physical capacity of a corridor, but also improving efficiency and reliability. Expand SIS funding eligibility beyond what is in the current plan to provide technology infrastructure, such as electric vehicle charging stations, smart signals, locational reference markers for connected vehicles, broadband for transportation purposes, etc. Provide more flexibility for funding emerging mobility solutions, such as quick response initiatives that could be funded in the current year. We have identified several potential policies regarding urban mobility and connectivity for inclusion in the SIS policy plan. Here are some of the ideas based on input received so far. Redefine capacity projects to include mobility and reliability improvements, similar to the concept discussed under the technology section. Prioritize opportunities to improve interregional travel on the SIS. An example would be projects to create express or through lanes, create bypasses or other alternatives to bottlenecks, support truck parking or other freight accommodations, etc. This also could include providing more options for travel between Florida's largest urban areas, such as passenger rail or intrastate air service. Provide flexibility for use of SIS funds on non-SIS facilities when that is the best option to improve the performance of the SIS. For example, if an SIS corridor is heavily congested and there are no viable options to add capacity to that corridor, could we use SIS funds to improve a parallel, arterial, or transit corridor if that improvement will pull local trips off the SIS and preserve capacity on the SIS for long-distance travel? We have identified several potential policies regarding rural mobility and connectivity for inclusion in the SIS policy plan. Here are some of the ideas based on input received so far. Reassess the SIS highway corridor criteria, particularly how we identify facilities capable of being improved to controlled access standards. This also could include how we consider context classification in the SIS designation/community and environmental screening process. Where there is a choice, focus SIS designation on the facilities in areas suitable for higher capacity corridors. Redefine capacity projects, in this case to include rural connectivity and through traffic improvements. This might include small projects, such as adding turning lanes or geometric improvements to improve SIS corridor safety. It also could mean expanding funding eligibility for broadband and other rural technology solutions that would improve connectivity. Strengthen rural corridor planning processes to identify programs of projects for both SIS and regional/local corridors. For example, think about how we improve a corridor like US 19, but also the connections from that corridor to rural activity centers. This could include stronger collaboration with local governments on how rural connectivity can support economic, community, and environmental goals. We value your input. Without it, the SIS cannot reflect the feedback from our partners and the public. What else do we need to do to improve these 5 focus areas? There is a public question forum available if you would like to give us input. Please give your form to the FDOT representative, or you can email it or mail it to Lori Maribel, FDOT District 7 SIS Coordinator. Her information is at the bottom of the comment form. Following our targeted outreach efforts, we will draft recommendations for the plan based on input received. We will review the information with the FTP/SIS Implementation Committee and FDOT management. The draft plan will be available for public comment at the end of this year on the Systems Planning website. The final plan is anticipated to be adopted by early 2022. Thank you for allowing us to present the SIS Policy Plan Update.
Half block to the west, or to the east.
When we go to Capitol Theater, we eat dinner there.
Yeah. It was nice.
Yeah, the food there is incredible.
Yeah, nice little ahi tuna salad.
Renee, did you watch any of the school board meeting yesterday?
It made my heart, heart palpitations, heartburn.
They couldn't agree to,
my homework on my laptop.
they couldn't agree to even have a meeting to discuss.
Yeah.
It was sad. Several of the bus drivers had called me in advance, already asking me, Renee, how should I approach this or what have you, which I had a conversation with them. But yeah, I was trying to do my homework and was, looking up, down, and then, of course, on my phone, looking at the comments from people. It just got to be hard to watch after a while. But some of the stuff just didn't make sense. I'm like, did you hear what you said? But, yeah, so,
We restarted the discussions with the school people about the UPass deal. I don't know. They seem very distracted, but
Well, I learned, there are bus drivers at the school that are paid, after 5 years, you're still making 15, 21 an hour.
really? Well, did I know that?
It probably doesn't do well to try to poach from someone we're trying to partner with, but, and I don't know if they like the schedule, that's why they also.
Well, they usually get fewer hours, plus summer times, they don't get any hours, a lot. Then they usually want to, we get school bus riders coming to PSTA. Like them even more. Jolly Trolley's starting wage is even more than that. I think even Looper is up above that. Not that they have that many people, but and then somebody told me that Brian Scott's charter company, he's trying to go up to like $18 starting wage or something.
That's probably because he's running for county commission.
What? Well, yeah,
Because he's running for county commission.
yeah.
He doesn't need a whole bunch of people saying, I get paid $10 an hour.
Brad, was it him? Jay? Was it Jay?
Well, no, it's not.
Jay Trumbull?
Is he a senator or a representative?
He's the House Representative Chair of the Appropriations Committee.
Well, I think our stuff is the, I have to ask Ron, but I think we're under the Infrastructure and Tourism Appropriations Subcommittee,
Oh.
transportation stuff.
Because